Hello, and welcome to another episode of Around the Verse, our weekly look at Star Citizen's ongoing development. I'm Sandi Gardiner.
And I'm Chris Roberts.
Yes, and on today's show, we open the canopy and climb into the pilot seat to check out all the changes being made to Cockpits. So stick around to see the latest enhancements to the flying experience.
Yes, but first, as you all know, the Evocati got their hands on 3.0 last week, and ever since they've been busy reporting issues and helping us track down various blockers, as well as allowing us to focus on areas to optimize. So the team has been poring over their feedback, and thanks to our new Delta patcher, we've been able to easily release fixes and issue updated builds almost every single day, which is pretty cool thing. So let's see how this expanded team of testers has affected this week's Burndown.
Welcome back to Burndown, our weekly show dedicated to reviewing progress on issues blocking the release of Star Citizen Alpha 3.0. We've not only been delivering updated 3.0 builds almost daily to our Evocati testers, we've also begun closing down necessary bugs and tasks to improve our cargo and shopping experience. So let's see how the team's progressing.
We went out to Evocati on Thursday for the first push, which is really good. So thank you to everyone that was involved with making that what it was. We also put out another update on Friday as well with some further vital fixes. The main ones being there was a physics fix to try and help the performance, and also an update to the crash handle so we could actually start getting crash handle reports back because it wasn't working previously. The new patcher meant that people were getting their update anywhere between like 30 seconds, 5 minutes, depending on internet connection. So the new patcher is really going down well with the community. They are loving not having to download 20 gig at a time every single time.
One of the reasons that we've been able to push every day and it's been so successful is because of the Delta patcher. And what that means is that instead of having to re-download entire pack files, we can just download what's changed. And so this has brought the patching time down from hours in some cases to minutes. One of the other advantages of the Delta patcher is that we can actually downgrade builds as quickly as we upgrade to them. So if we put out a build and there's something spectacularly wrong that we didn't catch in testing, we can just roll back to the previous version and then find out what was wrong.
The main focus lately has been on performance pushes, specifically requests from Chris Bolton. Usually what will happen is we will be getting a QATR or a test request from Chris to say he's put in some new code or he's changed some things up to help improve the performance of Stanton system. And what we'll do is we'll grab his latest binaries and put those into the latest build we have and start doing usually a full-blown barrage of tests on everything. So that'll be in like Stanton, that'll be in the other sections as well, but specifically Stanton, which has been struggling lately, especially with the rings in Port Olisar.
The performance when 24 players go crazy on a server, this is something which internally we have struggled to always reproduce, the reload of the real system, and then exactly this feedback loop. I think in a single player we had like 200 entities active and 16 players just joined the All-Star place. We had like 500 entities active. Now I looked at a server from Evocati with 24 players playing for some time. We have 5,000 entities active, resulting in a not optimized frame rate. And this is basically the fun for the next few weeks to actually figure out why we update so many entities. Do we need to update them? What is actually necessary? And we need to do more testing with 24 actual players, but it's not really practical to have 24 players constantly testing all the game, and especially if you want to have more players in a server. Just imagine number if you actually manage to get 1,000 players in a server. We cannot have 1,000 QA guys playing the game 8 hours a day. This is not really reasonable.
Once we've figured out the last 10,001 disconnect issue, we've got a build here from the UK that just deployed that was kicked off earlier this afternoon, that should the fixes for the disconnects seem like they've taken, we could get another code build done, or a full build if we absolutely needed to, go through the process of putting that up to the Evocati so that we can get them those fixes rolled out to them today. which is good. A couple of
I mentioned in the project leadership meeting, but it's important that the qualitative feedback is filtered through Todd, and we'll make priority calls on it, because there's some stuff like, the 10,001 error codes. Yes, we're definitely fixing, but then there's some subjective feedback of like, I don't like this, or I do like this, or whatever. Now, some of those issues they're calling out, we already know about, we're already working at addressing.
I always get a bit worried because, first of all, we're getting kind of subjective feedback that's sort of anecdotal. And so, someone can have a strong opinion, but, that could be their opinion, and it may be different than someone else's opinion that was spoken up. So it needs to go through the filter of us on the very high level of the kind of design side to make sure that, it's something that we want or agree, because a lot of times people can't see the big picture when they're making, feedback, because they don't know where they're like, well, this is missing, I need this. And we're like, yeah, no shit, we know it's missing. It's kind of like on our task list, we're working on it right now, and we understand that, it hurts your ability to dogfight if you can't see the status of your target or the status of your ship. So I just want to make sure we do that, because I'm a little worried that like we automate it, suddenly these subjective feedback get written up as a JIRA, they get put in someone's bucket, maybe they get assigned, and it's like we'll spend some time working on stuff that needs to have kind of direction and order and priority called out. And sometimes what people want to get fixed, the solution is somewhere else to fix the issue they're complaining about. So on the subjective stuff, I kind of want to make sure that we're going through a filter on that.
So one of the best things about having the Evocati testing the builds with us is that suddenly we have this test bed of 800 people on top of the people that we employ here. And it means that the number of issues that we can test and the stress that we can put on the servers goes through the roof. And that really helps putting the pressure on the servers that needs to be done.
I'd say it would be handy also if when we get to the stage where we are looking at whether we're going to launch, or if we do this every day as well, it'd be nice to know what stuff was fixed today or going in today as well. That kind of information would be great. I think.
Yeah.
But I know you probably have any fingertips, but that would be good. So we know kind of what we're actually putting into the build and so forth. I know that information's passed to Will and those guys because they needed to tell people, but I have no idea.
Yep, I think it's Tuesdays basically. I think moving forward, Tuesdays will incorporate the live sync within the director's sync, and P will have to go first, and people will obviously listen into that kind of stuff. And then that will be the way that Tuesdays has to kind of run.
I think what Aaron was saying, which is kind of what I was actually going to bring up, was, the way I look at it, we're in Evocati now. We've got 800 testers instead of 70 testers, and we should be looking to deliver a build every day if we can to them, because we have the Delta Patcher. But the key is not so much about, oh, we've got this one blocker, right? There's a crash here or a deadlock here, like, which was sort of the approach we were taking in like getting it to Evocati. The key is like, okay, like what bits of the things we've still left to do have gone in Monday? What have gone in Tuesday? Because I don't want to just only have like one blocker fix, right? Because we've got people finishing content, doing lighting, okay, have we, have these three areas now been lit and they've gone in? Has this ship has now been brought over to item 2.0, has it gone in? That's kind of thing, because what we actually want to do is have a steady stream of things that are getting like finished off or fixed up, putting in, and we want to know, okay, here's an Evocati, here's the things that have gone in that we think we fixed, because you've just got to sort of manage that over time. So we've got to get into that mode as opposed to the, what 3 bugs do we have to fix before we can go to Evocati.
So the next steps for us here in SIG is we're focusing on the shopping feature, shopping and commodities as a feature to present to the Evocati to say, this is now in a state where you guys can just go nuts, go ahead, buy, sell, do whatever you want.
We're fixing bugs left and right. We've got issues where certain clothing and items aren't showing up in the shops right. There's issues where you can't interact with an item through a glass case because the glass is getting in the way with the interaction system, so we're trying to figure that out. And we're trying to also work out some kinks with the try-on mode, where when you look to inspect an item, like a ship component or something, the character will look around like he's got gloves on and he's looking at his gloves. So like we're just ironing out kinks, getting everything working really well.
So right now I'm focusing on a suite of different shopping related bugs and features that we're trying to push out to the Evocati soon. Today, a couple of them are focused on the weapons being attached to the item ports on the shelves. So we've got trying out a weapon in the shop, drops it onto the floor for remote players. Weapon models disappear after inspecting them. And these are the great kind of bugs because they are not 100% repro, so they only happen sometimes, which are always the best to find and solve.
So what we've done is we've taken our top issues that we want to get fixed. These are a collection of bugs and tasks. We've gathered those together. We've put them into the Evocati fixed version in our internal Jira tracking software. And this is where we saw the Burndown graph come from last time. So when you see this report go out, you'll see the new list of numbers, sorry, the new total number.
So as you'd expect, we're seeing new issues daily from our influx of additional testers that we're fixing immediately in order to improve this release. And at the time of filming this, we're at 23 must-fix issues. So come back next week to see how we're doing and to keep a close eye on the in-depth details of the last remaining issues blocking the official SC Alpha 3.0 release here on Burndown.
Tune in next week to see how much progress we've made on the Evocati release. You can explore more details about what we've accomplished by checking out the production schedule report on our website.
Yes, so now let's turn our attention to this week's feature. So players are going to be spending a lot of time in the cockpit of their ship, so it was really important for us to make sure it was as visceral and engaging as possible. Some elements, like the player suffering a readout due to excessive G-forces, are already in the game, but we always knew we wanted to do more. So we kicked off a series of sprints focused on the cockpit experience for you in Star Citizen and in Squadron 42.
These improvements involve designers, animators, VFX artists, and many other disciplines across the company, since the changes would utilize a lot of our new tech, like the actor status system, Item 2.0, and other recently implemented systems.
Yeah, so let's check out what changes are coming to your ship's cockpit in this week's feature.
So the origin of the cockpit experience sprint was started with Chris taking a look at the overall experience of the player within a ship cockpit and wanting to make that experience as visceral as possible. He looked at sights and sounds and effects and just the overall feeling of it and wanting to make it really feel special. And so we all kind of got together and brainstormed different things that we wanted to see. Chris laid out his expectations. And then John Crew, lead tech designer there in the UK, and I partnered up to make this happen. So John and I sat down and outlined Chris's goals into what we're calling a sprint breakdown. So we started with, okay, here's our expectation for the first sprint, then the next sprint, and a sprint can be 2 weeks long, 2 to 3 weeks, usually around 2 weeks long. And we started with, just what does it feel like to be in a cockpit, flying around? And so we partnered up with animation, lead ship animator Jay Brushwood in Austin. We partnered up with audio team, with visual effects, engineering, to make this just an overall amazing experience while flying the ship. We got our design laying out the expectations, specifically breaking down the tasks based on the high-level direction from Chris. That included things like G-forces, updated G-forces, and how does that feel? Hit reactions in the cockpit, so when someone's shooting and firing, you're not just standing there static, but you're actually reacting to the hits of the ship. And then what happens inside that cockpit whenever you are getting hit by another ship. So we have actual effects that play in the ship cockpit, air decompression and flames sometimes, and the lighting changes depending on whether you're just in default mode, if you have auxiliary power running, or if you're in an emergency state. It's time to get out, it's time to eject. So we definitely wanted to make that feel real and as if you were actually in danger. At first we focused on just one cockpit type. So we took the Gladius as a test case, which uses our specific cockpit type, what we're calling the HOTAS CL. And there are 7 or 8 ships that use that cockpit type, and so we focused just on those 7 or 8 ships and to make those really feel special. So what we did was we took the Gladius cockpit and we said, okay, how can we change the interior of this cockpit to make it look make it feel and look different to the expectations that Chris is looking for. So we actually shifted the the seat a little bit. We changed the positioning of the throttle and joystick. We adjusted the position of the front weapon, ship weapon, so that when you're firing the weapon, you can actually see the muzzle from where you're sitting in the cockpit. And as a result, you see the muzzle effects as well. So not only are you seeing what's going on inside your cockpit, but you can actually see the effects of when you're firing your weapon and stuff as well.
It's a huge ongoing process. We've obviously got so many ships that we just can't do everything we want to do with them all in one release. For 3.0, we're starting with what we call the HOTAS CL ships, which is an animation template. So that's Gladius, Buccaneer, Herald, Cutlass, Sabre, Vanguard, and they're all getting a range of improvements to the cockpits, which will hopefully make the overall experience much more enjoyable.
In previous versions of the game, we had no visual cues on whether your vehicle was damaged or not. We only had a simple implementation where we had some damage effects playing when your ship was about to explode, but that was very simple and not very informative. So we wanted to represent different stages of being damaged. So slightly damaged, medium damage, heavy damage. And we also wanted to inform player that their vehicle is actually being shot at this very moment. So we created some VFX such as sparks, smoke, fire, like debris, charges, and things like that. So whenever your vehicle is being hit, you will see some effects playing. Also, depending on the health level of your vehicle, you will see more or less of these kind of damage effects. So we took these effects, I kind of placed them manually, and using basic implementation, we incorporated that into game to see whether it works, whether it's giving enough information for the player, and because it does, we'll take it a level further and we'll create like a proper implementation of that.
So the improvements, first up, we're tying in the actor status system. So you've seen that with all the breathing and stamina, that's now tied into the G-force system from the ships. So as you suffer G-force from your actions in the ship, it causes stress, which builds up stamina, makes you consume more oxygen. It actually changes your breathing in the ship, so you get all the, like you see fighter pilots have to do various breathing techniques to manage their breathing under high G-force. So as you're pulling high G-forces, you're going to hear that physical change on your character. If you ever got to the state where you were pulling so much G-force and you suddenly got out the ship, you would feel that stamina effect. You're not instantly getting out the ship back at full stamina. You're paying the price for your actions previously. Another aspect is ensuring the UI screens on the cockpits are of a consistent and minimum size on screen, because a lot of our cockpits were done 2-3 years ago, and the UI has significantly changed with 3.0, and we need to make sure there's a minimum amount of screen space dedicated to these UI elements so you can actually read them without having to zoom in, because there's lots of issues with some ships where to read them you have to zoom all the way in to read the text, which in the middle of combat is not something ideal. So we've got templates for all the screens going across those. That's why you'll have seen in previous ATVs, things like the Gladius cockpit screens have changed. They were way too small to be visible, so we've brought them closer to the player, made them larger. We've angled them in towards the player to reduce reflections, and added more of them. We're also bringing back the combat visor interface, which you see up on the top left and top right of your screen. So you can have, they're essentially support screens, so you could move information from your support screens up to those if you want, but by default they're your self status and the target or pin target status, so you can get an overview of those. Another thing is we've worked with the animation team about the poses in the cockpits. So across all of our 60 plus ships, we have about 6 to 10 different poses. So every ship fits one of those poses. There's a few that are unique, like the Nox, but pretty much every other one is used across multiple ships, which dictates the throttle, seat, control or yoke status, as well as a range where they can interact within the cockpit. So over time, we've picked templates for certain ships, modeled the ships around those. As we found, they've been adhered to in various levels of accuracy. So you'll find one ship had the template put in. When the artist was modeling them, they thought, oh, maybe if I move the joystick 1 centimeter to the left, that looks better in this cockpit, which is fine. The IK solution can deal with that. But then what happened was the next artist came along and went, well, that ship uses that template, so I will use that template that they've got in that ship. So I'll take their geometry. Oh, but this is actually, well, if I move this another centimeter to the left, it fits this ship better. So over time, some of the joysticks have got further and further away from the player. So when you get in the seats and the animation plays, which is the same animation of grabbing the sticks, you get this horrible snap where they go to the actual poses. So for those ships earlier that I listed, we've redone all the controls. They've all come back to the default position, which we actually changed. So every ship had to change to match it, because what we had decided was the template actually wasn't as good as it could be. So all the ships have their joysticks and throttles changed slightly. They've all been remodeled to fit the hands better. They've all got buttons on the control inputs. So we've got enough geometry and animations to play with for firing your guns. You can move buttons on it. Using afterburner or boost, you can use buttons on the sticks. We've gone through all the screens, which are now larger. They now all have buttons on there, so all the future actions will be interacting with the cockpit, have space. One of Chris's goals was someone that only knows how to use interaction mode can sit in the cockpit and just use that to work out what everything does in the ship. So they'll be able to go into interaction mode and work out how to turn the ship on just by looking around the ship, looking at the buttons that highlight, looking at the feedback they get, and be able to do everything from that.
Primarily what the animators are doing is we're working on, tuning in the G-force experience so it feels properly, where the camera sits in the cockpit in relation to, where you see all your UI and stuff like that. Finalizing finger poses, adding in, idles and, kind of fidgets, and anything that kind of, can breathe life to the cockpit. I mean, it's something that we've been focused on over the last 3 or 4 months, and there's still more work to do. There's always room for improvement, but I think for the 3.0 release, we're going to be in a healthy spot that'll give a lot of players some satisfaction flying around. We're improving our technology, and we're improving the animations that we're doing, but we're also putting in these systems that can rely on the overall health state of the ship. So, the UK programming team have implemented hit reaction animations that happen based off of what direction you're getting hit from all 6 axes. And they blend together, and basically you get jostled around in the cockpit on the direction that you're going. And that gets overlaid on top of the character animating his hands and, throttle and joystick. And in addition to that, the overall posing, fighting of G-forces that we have for the third person. So it's kind of a culmination of a lot of different things. There is like a lot of technology overlap between animation and design and the programming team, to get the overall desired effect. And we have review gate meetings where we all take a look at it, look for ways to improve it, think about new features like, maybe the health of your ship gets to, a certain percentage, then the red lights start blinking, there's fires going on, there's sparks flying, emergency lights are going, and then that way you have to, hit the eject button. The G-force animations and the Blendspaces we're using are all hooked into the IFCS system that drives the ship. So we're using actual G-force simulations that result in a blended animation state for a particular set of G-forces coming from X, Y, and Z.
The objective is to make it feel like a living, breathing vehicle. It's not just you press a random button on your keyboard or HOTAS and stuff happens. It's that's tied to a specific action which will have an in-game reaction to that. So you press the engine on button in the cockpit, will move and rotate, and long term your character will go out and interact with that automatically to do that when you press the button. So your finger will reach out and touch it, twist it, whatever the button is. The first step is getting all those buttons mapped out in the cockpit and interactive. The next step is those buttons animating themselves. So you do the action in interaction mode, or you press the shortcut key, you see a physical reaction for those things. And then the final step is the whole player leaning out, touching it, which is another reason why we've had to adjust all the cockpit screens so they're all within arm's reach of you, because we don't want the player to, you press a shortcut key whilst you're flying to change something. You don't want your character leaning forward, like bent double, trying to reach a button that was too far away, because that's just it's gonna mess with your view. It's gonna be unpleasant to deal with. On top of the animation unification, we've also changed how our enslavement process works between seats and players, which massively simplifies setup across the board. So when you're sat in a seat, that allows you to do other actions that you could do standing up. So for instance, it instantly allows you to do upper body animations that are set up anywhere else. You don't have to set up, say for the Gladius, an emote for saluting. That would have had to be a Gladius specific emote, whereas now we can have a HOTAS CL emote that works across all those ships, and probably in fact across all of them. So the actor enslavement's changed, which is great.
So we've had a lot of new kind of technologies in place, specifically for the cockpit to make it feel a lot more visceral. Romulo Espinosa, who's one of our gameplay programmers in the UK, has been a really huge help with that, changing kind of the way the seats are set up, the way the IK in the arms work, so that you can have a little bit more reach and things like that. So you know, there's been a lot of different new features developed just for this sprint that enable the artists and the animators and the visual effects artists to make their stuff look as great as possible and feel as good as possible.
For the cockpit experience, we had to implement a different type of enslavement. So what we were doing before this new enslavement, we were using the old one. So for the old one, what we had was 2 ADBs. ADB is just an animation database with all the animations we use for that entity. So in the old enslavement, we had one for the vehicle and one for the seat. And then all the animations were being put there. But the point with that is we were deactivating the player basically. So it was the seat who was saying, I need you to play this animation, which is stored on my database. But in this case, that's for our project, that's madness, because if you need any animations on the player, you need to copy those animations into this seat. So if you need to play emotes, you need to fire your weapon while you are seated or wherever, you need to add all those animations into every single ADB. And we have a bunch of ADBs, one per seat. So it's impossible. So we created this new enslavement, which is the seat is still in charge, is who says, I want you to play this animation, but the player is still active. So the player itself can play animations. So we don't need anymore to add those animations into every single ADB. We just say, I want you to play this animation, player, and because it's on you, it's up to you to play it. So the player is just gonna do it. You have 2 options really. You can enslave the player to the seat or on the other way around. But in this case, the seat can move. Or we have these animations with the canopy opening and stuff like that. So you want the player to move accordingly to the seat and not the other way around. We don't want the player to stand up and then the seat move or wherever. What you want is you want to move the seat and then the player react according to that movement. So that's why we enslave the player to the seat and not on the other way around.
Another part of the sprint is setting up the light group and light group transitions for cockpits. So it's something we've had in our multi-crew ships, is the damage states, VFX and lighting triggers So when your ship is damaged, you have all this cool VFX and lighting of the ship in an emergency state, but we never really had that on the single-seaters. So we've started doing that in those ships. So rather than just purely relying on the UI element telling you you're low on health, which when you don't have the CVI in 263 is incredibly hard to tell, where you've got the cockpit lights flashing red, we've got all the damage effects of smoke, flames coming in the cockpit, so it really does hammer it home what state your ship is in, and then when you repair it all goes away and it all goes backwards and forwards.
For the cockpit experience for the VFX team, it's more about the damage, specifically directional feeling of the damage. So currently in the game we do have interior damage, but it's not really a directional, so you don't really get a proper sense of where the attack is coming from.
All the VFX are coming from the cockpit model itself. We are not creating the cockpit, we are taking whatever is being created and we are making sense out of it. So you won't see random effects coming from random places. It is thinking about what would happen, like what devices are on in the cockpit and what type of distraction you would see in an actual vehicle of that type. There's a lot of thought put into that. Placement of effects has to be done manually, so each vehicle has a different cockpit, so I need to manually place these effects so it makes sense. We don't want, for example, fire coming off a fire extinguisher, unless it's made in UK, but that's a whole nother story. So yeah, the placement is done manually, but we are creating like a library of effects. So I can use the same effects I made for Gladius on another vehicle, but it will look different just because the context is different. These VFX are coming from different objects and locations, so it is making a huge difference.
When you're in the cockpit, the type of effects you're going to see will be sparks, smoke, nothing that's going to be too kind of in your face so you can't see where you're going, because you're not going to want that necessarily, are you? Unless you really are in big trouble, and that is new compared to what we've currently got in the game. Currently in the game, it's either, the damage is either on or off really, so you don't really get a sense of where anything's coming from.
So for the cockpit experience, we always try to give the player more feedback. So we decided to create like different blend spaces for hit reactions and pass out and wake up animations. So basically a blend space is just is an asset that allows us to have any number of animations and blend between them according to different inputs. So for instance, if I pass out and I want to give the player like different impulses according to the G-forces, we cannot just create 100 animations. We can have like 10 different animations or maybe 5 different animations, and according to the input, in this case the G-forces, we can blend between those assets and play a really nice animation in between them. So we did that for the pass out and wake up, and for the heat reaction it's the same thing. So in that case the inputs are the distance of the impact from the ship, and then how heavy is the thing that is impacting the ship. So it's not the same to be on a Gladius and someone throwing you a fork or throwing you one of the big ass missiles. So we needed some kind of different animations to give the player some kind of feedback for the impacts. Apart from that, we worked on animation-driven IK. Animation-driven IK, we have two different systems in place. One is the limb IK and the other one is the animation-driven IK. The base for both is the same thing, but the way they are activated is different. So for the animation-driven IK, it's the animator who says, I want to use IK at this point in animation, I don't want to use this IK. So what is the IK for? So when you try to reach an object, or in this case for the cockpit, the throttle and the joystick, or maybe the steering wheel, because those objects are moving, we need the hands to move with them. Otherwise you will see some kind of delay that you can see in other games. So that's why with this IK we can like put together, like glue together the hands and those objects. And that's why the animation-driven IK is for. The limb IK is the same thing, but we activate it in code.
Before the official sprint kicked off, we did about 2-3 weeks with myself, Jay, and the VFX guys just going over various alterations. So we picked Gladius as the test case because it's used by far the most in Squadron, so you're going to be sat in there for a long period of time, so it needs to be something that's good and an easy place to understand. So we went through so many iterations of, is this seat in the right place? Move the seat up, down, left, right, backwards, forwards, move the screens forwards, move the canopy bars around, move all the buttons. We had a list of 20, 25 actions that we knew we would need in every single cockpit. So that's in the new guidelines. And then there's about another 10, 15 that need to go on the control inputs, so either your stick and throttle or your yoke or any combination of those things. We've built more in for redundancy, so anything in the future that needs an action that currently doesn't, we've got space to do it. We don't need to go back and redo it all again. There was a lot of backwards and forwards with multiple departments on getting to where we are. Whilst we could do this with the old Item 1.0 ships, it would have been a huge amount of sort of throwaway work. So whilst we were in the process of doing the conversion to 2.0 as we started doing this sprint, so we managed to tie them both in together, but with Item 2.0 makes it all incredibly quick, and you set it up for one ship, it takes minutes to set it up on the next ship rather than hours or days having to manually duplicate everything we would have had to have done before. I think the most challenging thing was the amount of ships that we have to deal with, because there were some pretty big decisions we had to make whilst doing it, knowing that if we change this template, that means we have to go revisit 10, 15 ships, and it's getting all the directors and leads on board and agreeing that it's like, if we do this, it's a big change, your department's going to have to do lots of work, but it unifies everything nicely, and in the future, any changes that we have to do automatically happen across all ships. You don't have to do that change 15 times anymore. You do it once and it just works. But it means you don't get to work on these other cool features, so no one likes going back and feeling like they're redoing stuff, but sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and revisit what you've done to make things better for the future.
In our game, getting into a seat is not just I press a button and I get in there. No, we need to move the ladder, we need to open the canopy, we need to move the dashboard, we need to move the seat, we need to take a seat, we need to push some buttons. All that sequence, you need the player to be enslaved. And I think that's the most difficult thing in our game, which is, do you play all that sequence and still don't lose control of the entire sequence and the entire thing? Another thing that was quite challenging is the animation-driven IK. We had to basically rework the entire thing that we were using for animations. We had to basically reinvent all the way we were processing all the animations in order to get rid of that one frame delay we were having. So basically, we were having an object, we were having our hand, we were trying to reach this object. So basically the hand was always behind because this hand was moving first, but then the object, so we were always one frame behind. But in the case of this new animation-driven IK, after our changes, what happens now is, because I'm enslaved, my hand is kind of enslaved to this object. I'm gonna leave the object to move first, and then with that up-to-date position, I'm gonna move the hand, and then we are in sync all the time. In this case, it was kind of a brute force, a gigantic email between all the clever people, Chris Roberts, Ivo, Jens, Bolty, everyone in the company was trying to get these things right, because this code has been there forever. But if we break this code, nothing is going to work in the game. Absolutely nothing. And everything is going to break. Mannequin is not going to work, the character tool is not going to work, the editor is not going to work, and of course the game is not going to work.
So the plan for right now is to release the various features as part of the cockpit experience in chunks or phases. So the changes we're making on the cockpit experience sprint were things that were always kind of in the works. They were always planned to have happened. Really, it's been Chris's vision from the very beginning. But because it required so much attention from so many different teams across the whole project,
There was never a considerable focused effort between all those people at the same time to make it happen. And so really it took this kind of gathering of people, coordinating everyone into a sprint structure to get everyone focused all at once into making the cockpit experience really to the same high quality standard that Chris has had since the very beginning.
So as you saw, smoothing out animations, adding hit force reactions, and damage indicators are just some of the ways that we've upgraded your flying experience.
Yes, very cool. And you'll see some of these features in 3.0, while others will be coming in later releases and Squadron 42.
So once all these features are in, it'll help create the immersive gameplay experience that we've all been striving for, especially me.
It sure will. And that's it for today's show. We'd like to thank our subscribers for supporting all of our shows. October's subscriber flare will be released this week, so scout out a spot in your hangar to display the next set of ship schematics.
Yeah, and finally, it's been just over 5 years since we first announced Star Citizen at GDC in Austin on October 10th, which was 2 days ago. And it's incredible to think how far we've come in such a short amount of time. And it's only been possible because you've supported us along the way. So a big thank you to all the backers out there and for all the you've done over the years. It's really, really appreciated. And actually, in the light of you guys backing it, there's a couple of cool little gifts that we got recently. So if I pull them out here. One, we got a very cool patch from SFC Moon, who's just returned from his tour in Iraq, and he, I think, even arranged a bar citizen or a get-together at least in Baghdad. So it's pretty amazing how far that we have. We're everywhere. It's very cool. Reach. So yeah, thank you very much for sending this very cool patch, and much appreciated. And then also, I got a really sweet letter from Louis Carillon, who is obviously French and probably can pronounce his last name far better than I can, who his father is Spécial. He's the, I guess, biggest French collector of meteorites, and also has I believe, a kind of mineral. Yeah, and he sent us, so we'll open this on camera. But anyway, he said ever since he was 4 years old, his dream was to go and explore the moon. And as he got older, explore the entire of space. And he's always thought he was born 100 years too early. And then he discovered Star Citizen a few years ago. And it was a revelation. And in a way, his dream is going to come true. So he was a fan of Wing Commander in the days and Freelancer. And he's really thankful, so he sends this gift and with the book that was written by his father, and also a very cool.
We can open that after the show. We'll open it in the credits. Rolling credits, really?
Really? Why not?
Yep. Rolling credits.
Okay, rolling credits.
Yeah, so we can get a close up on it.
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll have a cursor. I'm gonna get started. I'll finish. Whee. There we go, and
what is it?
It's a meteorite. So here you go. Very cool. I can do a close for that. But thank you very much, Louis. That's a really, really sweet gift, and thank you very much for your support, and thank you to everybody for your support. It's pretty amazing to be here and building the game at the scale and scope that we're doing, and it's all down to you guys. So thank you very much. Looking forward to many more years of expanding the Star Citizen universe and giving you amazing stories to experience in the likes of Squadron and beyond. So thank you, and until next week,
we will see you
around the verse. Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.